And we're live from the MIT Media Lab. And this is a wrap up for day one. This lone guy thinks it's funny. This is a wrap up for day one of the data visualization workshop. And we've made some good progress. What's happened basically since the last hangout is that we've broken into three or four teams, and we're about to hear from each team on the kind of the progress that they made and then where they're headed. And so it seems like we basically would call today a good beginning. And so the overall plan is going to be to hack forward, I think, in these teams. And we'll have an influx of some new people tomorrow. We'll find out at the end when we go off air, like who maybe won't be joining us as well. But basically, let's hack forward in our configurations. And if there's issues that you have or resources you need or something like that, please say it. And let's all forward the link to this hangout to all of our lists and friends and so forth, and see if more people would be interested in helping us break through those barriers. So without further ado, we're going to start with before it's too late. And here we go. There. So you can just advance your slides. Yeah. Great. Hanson gone. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Nata. So we're the Before It's Too Late team. We spent most of the time kind of debating different ways or the best ways to layer different types of data in virtual reality.
Let me mirror this for the screen.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Please go
on. But what we're choosing to go forward with is two specific storm-related data that we have for Broward County in Florida. One storm that produced 3 inches of rainfall, and then another storm that produced 4 inches of rainfall. The significance in terms of climate is when you increase the water table that significantly, you actually contaminate the fresh water with the salt water, which becomes an issue, and it's just something that they're beginning to look at. What's interesting about this case is that we have the data that we have. They have built their own 2D versions of these flood areas, as well as their own 3D rendering. So we have good points of comparison here. What we're going to hopefully work on, Amadeo will hopefully help us with, is translating the data that we have, which is currently structured in GIS format, so that we can bring it over onto the Symmetry platform and create something in VR for that. So that's hopefully what we're gonna do tomorrow when we get here. And then hopefully the goal at the end is to be able to have these 3 different visualizations, one 2D, one 3D, their version, and then our version of a 3D data visualization as a point of comparison. And what we're hoping to understand here is like what's more impactful. Are you able to, do you feel more by looking at it in virtual reality, or do you feel more by looking at this 2D map? And then second is, are you able to absorb more information in VR versus in 2D? So those are kind of the 2 overarching questions that we're hoping to answer. Yep, and that's us.
Dynamite. Any questions for Hanson or the team Symmetry before it's too late? Okay. That's awesome, I have to say. That's actually good progress in terms of we started more or less people who didn't know one another, talking about things that no one's ever done before. So that's, you tightened it up really well. So let us all take a note from Hanson and his team also in terms of 2 things that we might be shooting for at the end. Well, first of all, survival. Did we get through a finish line with data and visualized in VR? But stretch goal, is it impactful? And that really is what VR's core use case is like that visceral feeling that you can get, almost like when you lose yourself in this reality, the cinematic and emotional potential of that. And then number 2 is really aligned to the kind of gestalt of this course and business applications, which is the way you said is, can you understand it better, faster, cheaper? I don't know. Is there somehow is it superior? Does it work better for understanding the data? And that you can take that a bunch of ways. So great, thank you. I'm sorry, let me ask, do you need anything? Do you have any technical coffee? Okay, that's big. We can get coffee. Oh, you guys, I've got a treat for you. Thomson Reuters who we love, but just slightly short of commercially endorsed because it's MIT. But we love them, and they're giving us pizza and soda and water and everything good tomorrow. So come on back in person, and we can also atomize it and send you the the pattern for your 3D printers online. Okie dokie. So who's next? We've got options. Are you guys ready? Okay, great. So next we have ScatterViz. Okay.
I might have called it something different.
Okay. Yeah. ScatterViz.
That's me.
So can you introduce yourself and the team, and then hit it?
Did not list my team. You have the team list
No,
here?
you just
Okay.
talk.
Hi, I'm Elliot Hibbler. I'm working on the ScatterViz or ScatterPlotViz team, along with team. Can you scream your name really loud real quick?
David.
Along with David, James, Chris, and
Gladys.
Yes.
That's our current team, and
What do we do?
I'm giving you credit for the team.
Oh.
and I wrote this very quickly when I saw the much more professional looking blurb from the Sloan folks, that we are trying to utilize an A-frame model that the company facility has to identify best, or at least good practices for displaying different types of data in a VR scatter plot environment. For doing this right now, we were looking at a couple different types of data. Particularly, we want data to fit their current model would have about 3 or 4 different attributes. We were very interested in time series data and geographic data. And some ideas we have are Cambridge educational things by sex and age, and financial asset data. And for doing the visualizations, we're going to find some pictures of Cambridge for some background context for the environment itself. And we might want to display other geographic data, but that might be too time intensive for the brief time we'll have tomorrow. I'm going to hand it over to Chris to explain anything else you walked over.
Sure. Probably the most important thing we're working with is, what is our bridge to VR? We can do a scatter plot in almost any 2D graphics package, but we have this notion that displaying 3 dimensions of data in 3 dimensions has some utility to it. So what we're thinking of is being able to orbit easily around this scatter plot to potentially gain new insights into what data is there. And we're hoping to see patterns that are interesting and patterns that lead to other follow-on questions. I think our stretch goal is to be able to do further investigation of the data, whether that's through a pivot table type breakdown or supplementary data over time. And I'll be happy when we have the first thing up and running, but it's looking good so far.
The hide?
Yeah.
Okay. So, what do you need?
So tomorrow we have, and we've already done some today, are setting up an environment for us to collaborate better with CodePen.io for code, and then NeoCity's website where you put some assets, I believe. We have to prepare some of the data. It's currently only in table form online, so we have to make a nice CSV. We also really would like to find some more some financial data, not necessarily city financial data. It would probably have about 3 to 4 attributes and 200-ish observations for the current iteration of the scatterplot program. And we're also just chasing down other assets like pictures I mentioned to try to fill out the VR environment that we have. Then we're just gonna hack and find stuff that works.
Cool. So just to double check, when you were saying here the parameters, were you talking about line 4? So this is very interesting. I want to highlight something important about line 4 for team DataViz or ScatterViz for the moment. And it's one of the things I'm hoping for, if we're successful in hitting upon a design pattern that's repeatable, and you can take it from data to a VR environment that's somehow better, is I would expect to see that people would this. So like, oh, for the design pattern we have, like we'd be looking for like 3 to 4 attributes, 200-ish observations, etc. It could be 50,000 to 250,000 observations in like 2 dimensions or whatever. But there'll be some aspects of like dimensions or features of the data that would be part of the design pattern from ingestion through like emitting and then interaction. So this is a real good sign. This is a harbinger that I was hoping to see today. And so I volunteer after class to do some poking around to start to develop potential candidates for you in the financial data world that meet these patterns, and in hopes that you might hit upon a repeatable design pattern.
Great.
Anything else you need?
I think you mentioned that there's somebody out there with JavaScript and A-frame development experience. I think that would be ideal. I don't think that it's crucial, but it would add a lot.
And what's the barrier you're hitting?
We're not hitting a barrier yet, but I think we're going to get real ambitious when we start to see things that work. Features are going to suggest themselves, and we're going to want to, test them out.
Okay, got it. All right, so that makes sense, and there are people coming. I know that probably Amadeo will be fully utilized, but I have to say he's one of the people I have to go to.
That's fine. That's fine. We understand that.
Okay, great. So anything else from your team?
I think that's good. I think we're good.
Yeah, really good work. That's awesome.
Thanks.
Really good. Okay, so we have one more, I think, which is like the surprise team, I suppose, right? I can get you. Okay, there you go. And there's Stephanie when you're ready. Okay.
Yes, I know.
Okay, sorry.
Great. Great. So I'm Kathy Trigolo, and I was working on a team with Daza and Stephanie, thinking about educational applications of data in VR, and really thinking about it from more of a K-12 perspective, and what can you do with data that is relevant and then can also be manipulated, or that students could interact with. So we kind of took a little bit to get to an idea, but really the goal is that the students are going to be there in the data that they would potentially have collected. Something that's relevant to what they would be doing in school. For instance, one of the ideas we came up with was water temperature sampling for a local body of water. This is a very common curriculum experience, particularly in middle schools, but high schools will do it as well. So they have their own data, and that they can be creating something that works for them. So really the next steps are, what we started doing is identifying some successful student A-frame projects that Stephanie's already seen and that have already been shared on the week of A-frame. So we have some links to that. Looking at what's the developmentally appropriate instructional goal. It would be different if you're looking at middle school versus high school because of the level of abstraction. And then really one of the next things we have to do is find a manageable data set. We don't want it to be too big because the student A-frame and teacher A-frame skills wouldn't be such that they'd be able to manage a really large data set, but that hopefully they'd be able to scale it up. And then for us to create that environment with some kinetic bodies, because students respond to the interactive aspects of it, something that visually would allow students to really intuit what the differences are in the segments of the data. So, small fish, medium fish, big fish. These are some of the different ideas we were coming up with.
That's a good lesson plan for some age groups. That is like the lesson plan.
Yeah. So we have, a couple of project samples. Stephanie was looking for some of the ones that she's worked with. And Stephanie, I wanted to turn it over to you so you could either share or talk a little bit more about the technical aspects.
Oh, sweet. Okay. Let me just turn screen sharing on for myself really quick.
Okay. Great. We've got you, Stephanie. Can you screen share the amazing stuff you're showing us?
All right, cool. Yeah. So I've got a project that I was working with for a nonprofit and a big group of high school students with Chick Tech PDX. And this is what we got by the end of a day's worth of working in A-frame. The students, I also taught them how to model in Blender, but they figured out how to use the Markdown language, how to create their own world, how to import assets.
Wait, tell us the age group.
Oh, the age groups, for this particular class, they were ages, I think, 12 through 16. They were, yeah, a combination of like middle school and high school students. But yeah, and so as you can see, they managed to actually make these worlds, and then once they entered them, they were all like super engaged and really into sharing each other's creations and just like sticking each other's cardboard on their peers' heads, sometimes in sneak attack mode. But yeah, so this is about as much as you can expect students to make on their own, and this was like a relatively large classroom also. But yeah, so these are all pretty low poly primitive shapes. Emphasis on the low poly part if you're going to be using assets like that are custom made, like fish or anything that isn't a geometric like primitive. Because I'll show you this other example. This one kills your browser. Here's like this cat that was 3D scanned and it's massive, and here's a cat that was made and possibly decimated, and this cat like will load faster than the rest of this web page, so it'll just be like a cat in space. So these are just a couple of the things that you want to emphasize to kids when they get really excited about virtual reality. They come up with these really crazy, brilliant ideas, and you have to explain to them that those ideas take time to make. But you know, other than that, the level of enthusiasm with K through 12 with virtual reality is like, I mean, it's like a dream come true for them, because now they have a world that they can completely control, and that they engage with in a way that is really similar to the way that they engage with video games. And so if you can combine that with an educational sort of directive, then I think you would have a really successful way to get kids to engage with data that they actually take home and continue with. A lot of these students contacted me like a week after this class ended with like these really nice thank you notes and like, check out my progress, I'm still working on this thing. And I was like, oh wow, yay, that's very flattering. But yeah, anyway, so you get a really positive response from the sort of from what you gathered. Let me, yeah, hopefully that was good.
Yeah, that was good. Thank you for doing that. It takes a while to dig out these old projects sometimes. We found a couple, or Stephanie found a couple. So what do you, so looking at tomorrow, I think you already sort of foreshadowed a little bit what the challenge was, but what, well, I guess, do you need anything? First of all, resources, or and if there's any kind of talent set or something like that that you would need for a team member for the people that are coming tomorrow, what would that be?
Just from the UX UI perspective, maybe some input on that. We definitely need to find the right data set that's the right size. There's a lot of data out there, and actually I was planning to look at other water temperature projects that people have been sharing this in 2D for ages.
Yep.
So we could just basically take a project that's been shared and mimic that.
Okay.
In terms of data sets, if we needed to.
So
or we could pull something from
NOAA,
NOAA or something like that.
All right. So
we can
thinking
see how
about
people
water, like sampling
conceived of it.
water, maybe
Yeah.
sampling temperature,
Yeah.
something like that. Okay, that's good. Let me think about that too. We made a little progress on that for today.
Yeah.
So
and then, Stephanie may have some other things she wants to share.
did you have other things you want to share, Stephanie?
In terms of what we need for tomorrow?
Oh, I'm still having issues with importing like external data sets, but if we like wrote it all within an array and like converted, if the data set's small enough, then it's not a problem at all. But if we do need to pull in like JSON or CSV files, then I will need some help with that. But as far as like simple visualization in D3 and A-frame, I've got it covered.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. That's good. I'll come hack with you all tomorrow as well. We'll try to get some of the Brookline people too. So there's one. So those are all the major projects that were worked on. But there's another one, and I want. Is that could you, Meg? Could I? Would you join me for a moment? I want to set something up quickly for you to, I guess, just to percolate for tomorrow. So there's two. We'll be joined by another team of data scientists and some other folks tomorrow. One of them will be from Thomson Reuters, and among other things, they've hired a couple of MIT undergraduates to work on this kind of legal hacker data challenge. And the challenge is to basically do what is, so-called entity extraction from a ginormous pile of SEC EDGAR filings, basically publicly traded companies that do disclosures. And if you've ever looked through that, it's just a really hard, voluminous data set. I've tried to scrub it because there's contracts disclosed and some other legal data that I'm interested in. Well, this data challenge is basically to identify in the data, like the relationship that's been disclosed from a company that's like filing their disclosures when they disclose the relationship with another company. So it might be like, like at a high level supplier, customer, like some joint venture or something like that, debtor, creditor. But then, it gets, infinitely, like complex with the disclosures and financial accounting in terms of like, collateralized, like 12-year, slightly beige, medium level, whatever. It's just like incredible taxonomies. And so they want to know how, based on analyzing the words around the tag that's used, how accurate it probably is. And it's a neat problem, and it relates to what you said partly. They could come and hack on lots of different things, but you talked about like looking at relationships and graph, and is there a way that we could deal with that better? This is one way to look at the relationships between publicly traded companies and publicly traded companies and other companies, and who's buying and selling from who are in key partnerships, with what period of time, what kind of goods, what sectors are they, where the fluctuations and the different dimensions of the relationships. And they've already made progress on some of that. They're really up to the second on the data. And for this hackathon thing, it's really just a sort one of the confidence that they use the right tag. So we don't need VR for that, but I think we could take it in another direction and look at the nature of the relationships and maybe start just graphing it and seeing maybe a time series even or something like that. Have you ever done entity extraction or like?
Well, I know some techniques, but
Yeah.
I've never done that. I don't have any experience, but I have the knowledge.
Might that be a sort of a zone that could be interesting for the kind of graphing or VR visualization?
Can you share this
Mhm.
website?
Yep, I can. And it's on the class page. So if you go to the class page, there's 2 hackathons that people are working on. Next week is like computational law, like data, it's contracts and transactions and stuff, but we'll be working on contract analytics and that financial entity thing. And so here's the overall class page, which maybe looks familiar. And if you scroll down, it says like legal hackathon data projects, like hidden at the bottom. But legal hackers know, they know where to look. And if you kind of click on this one here for more information, you can get right to the data challenge. But also I don't mind like shortcutting it to get you the CSV files and some of the stuff that they give you when you sign up. It's all public, and it's interesting data that you might enjoy hacking on and seeing what they've done. But more to the point, just to get a head start, something that's current and futuristic, and that's very now. So I just wanted to. So you're nodding your head. So let the record demonstrate, although I'm screen sharing, that the student is nodding her head in a positive way. Okay, so maybe I'll listen to the Thomson Reuters people tomorrow and see if y'all want to hack on that. And just have a look anyway, because like somebody around here should be doing this, I think. All right, so now we're going to, that's great. Come off of the screen share, and we're gonna wrap it up for today. Any final kind of questions, comments, concerns, ideas, hopes, dreams? Rick?
Are there any standards for the class that anybody's heard of for data visualization?
The 2 that we've adopted so far, I guess people haven't heard of, but the 2 from your team, from Hanson, are the 2 that felt pretty good to me. One of them was, could we go, in a sense, not backwards, but like, can we pivot back to the core use case, I think, of VR, which is like visceral feeling as part of it. That's a nice one. And then the other one was more customary, which would be like, when you understand the import of the data faster. So there's different ways to test that. I was saying up to, for the class, Cesar Hidalgo has got some really cool test suites where he can see if people understand data quicker, or if they can like do a task faster with his tools than in like Excel. And so we can imagine ways to begin to test that. But I'm going to say not really, and that's kind of deliberate.
I was actually saying as a question to the class. Has anybody seen
Oh, is it, okay, so quick question before we go on forward. Has anyone seen,
I'm thinking of all the online people that aren't here.
what kind of standards?
Standards for integrating data into VR.
Is anyone in the class physically here seen that?
I've seen proposed standards for user experience of interacting with the environment. Even that's missing in VR. We don't have a standard set of tools for to say where is the user, what's useful to present, what kind of controls can we give them. All that's being explored right now. And if we have access to VR, probably via the lab by students and by Valve, is a great place to show where people are experimenting with user controls in VR. Okay.
So basically, I'll bottom line. So part of what Chris was saying is like interaction spaces, and that's missing. But that's a bit orthogonal to. Well, I don't know. Well, that is an example, I guess. Interaction.
Okay. A really good pioneer who knows what they're doing to visualize the next 3 to 5 years in VR as far as user experience is Mike Alger, A-L-G-E-R. He has a YouTube which is called the VR UX Design Manifesto.
Wow.
And tonight, everybody should watch it because it's 15 minutes and he knocks it out of the park. Touch on data a little bit. Yes, Mike Alger, A-L-G-E-R, VR UX Design Manifesto. Must see. He's got a follow-on video that explains a little bit more. And also the recommendation is if you have access to a high-quality VR unit, try the application called The Lab from Valve. It's free, it's worth trying. It's a remarkable experience.
So cool. Maybe okay, so that's a good one.
Oh, so I have access. If you want, I can, am I on? I'm not on speaker, am I? I'm not on the speaker. I'm just like, okay, yeah. So if you guys are interested.
Okay, so we're just about to wrap, but did you have something to add, Stephanie?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to add on top of the. So I have access to Vive here. So if you guys are doing WebVR projects, yeah. So if you guys are doing WebVR projects and you want me to like get inside of them and move around and test it, just send me the link and I can pull it up on the Chrome window.
Okay. Let's do that, Stephanie. So Amadeo has kindly agreed to bring his Vive tomorrow, so we'll have one here, and we're gonna have one in Portland as well. Like, hell yeah, that's a really good one. I was hoping for this kind of stuff. So I guess when we close, so let's close with one other thing, which is it's a bit of a stretch goal. I don't know if we'll get there or not, but Amadeo and I were talking about maybe adding a kind of almost a discussion-oriented element of this. So this is very project-oriented, and that's deliberate. But there's a lot to talk about with questions like Rick's questions about are there standards to go for, or suit. Who was asking about these are like frameworks or things like that. And so Amadeo and I were talking about would it be interesting if we insert like maybe a partial unconference format for like an hour at some point, maybe before or after, maybe after, and the discussion session that we would hold would be one on the topic of like if you're looking forward, if there were if there were standards basically for like let's say data visualization of VR, and let us say that multiple different platforms wanted to use that this design pattern that we had with maybe some conventions around it, like the dimensions of the data and other stuff, like what would it take? So we looked at some existing standards for like XML specification of VR environments, and so like there are ways, there's like sort of like almost like reference implementation, like ways to describe how many objects and where their orientation, and so of course you can import and export from some systems, but nothing really was scratching the itch, and there are different levels of abstraction and complexity, and many of them had been really rotting on the vine. So what we were thinking is, well, maybe it would be kind of like two kinds of topics. One would be like there's some technology stuff that almost like you shouldn't have to worry too much about, stuff like passing forward audio from session when they maybe went from one experience to another, and passing forward maybe things like that, how many images and where the orientation were. Then there's some other stuff that we would want to talk about that are maybe more futuristic and be worth backfilling, and that might be stuff like Like what?
Well, the fundamental issue is that there's all these competing platforms. Unity, and you have Symmetry, obviously, this thing, and then you have A-Frame and stuff, but every engine's different, and they're all designed in very different ways. Not all of them can work for every case. And so we have to figure out a way to make all these interoperable, basically. So how will that be? And so it could be some sort of inter-sharing system that exists at a very high level, which is like a portal that opens up from one experience and gets you to another. So you go from like a Unity experience to an A-Frame experience, or an A-Frame experience to something else. And so what are the standards to define those portals, basically? So it's a series of texture and audio sharing and a position sharing, and maybe an avatar that's consistent throughout all of them or something. But I think this
search term associated with that. It's called VR linked traversal.
Yep.
And
Yep.
Mozilla Group's working on it.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yes.
Because what built the web? Clicking on stuff.
Yeah,
We can't even do that.
It's a hyperlink question. So yeah, it's VR link traversal is what Chris said, and so that's exactly the same conversation. There's an aspect of that we wanted to talk through, which is in the narrow context, not of every game environment or everything that people are doing in VR, but if someone say has a purpose of like I'm working with data, maybe I'm on a team or I'm doing my job, or I'm just curious on something, and now I want to look at a little bit of Symmetry, which does this amazing job with the physics and stuff. Now I want to look a little bit at this A-Frame hack because I want to kind of crank out some interoperable thing that goes right from Google data or takes advantage of that. Now maybe I want to do another hack in another system. There's a concept that isn't really utilized in hypertext links so much, but it's one of like a context pass forward. So you can continue with a session, an element of a session fundamentally. So it might be some preference data, I was thinking, would be one thing, some preference or config thing that related to maybe like the data set. Like where do I find the data set? And like you want to, you talk the same data and where you left off. Maybe it would be a little bit of config or preference for the user if you have certain like kind of settings where like you make this blue or you put things a certain place. It might be something with identity where you pass forward not so much your avatar and your wrapper, but maybe deeper identity stuff. So what endpoints could you be found at for purposes of routing, messaging, or authorizations with OAuth 2 from like GitHub to Facebook to like, Drive or something. So maybe a little bit of identity, some credential tokens or something. So some of that kind of stuff we were talking about, we didn't get too deep into it other than identifying, wow, this aspect of portal traversal from one computational environment and system and platform to another, to explore data and have a task and sort of follow it through, has higher level conceptual, almost like conversations that we like to just talk about while we're together. So that was the other thing I guess that we should just bring up, that we had was interest in exploring some of these things, and it's really not the same as hacking something. It's sitting in a circle and talking and taking notes and brainstorming and I don't know, arguing a bit. It's usually fine with this stuff, but it's like unconference thinking. So if there's people interested in that, we can support that. Like we'd like to talk about that. We don't want to host the class and we have only a few hours to put together presentations, but it's not like the provost of MIT isn't going to expel us if we don't have completely finished or perfect projects. Like we can allocate our time in different ways, and we can choose to talk a certain amount, or some of us can have a side conversation, or if it's interesting but not compatible with the class, just know that it seems like Chris and Amadeo and others online as well may want to have these dialogues, and I encourage you to keep in contact and to carry that forward, because it is part of the overall mission, if you will, of what we're trying to do here. So it's largely technical, but it's not solely technical. Okay, good, great. And then Adam, did you have some? Elliot, you had a question or a thing on your face, or thinking something? Okay, that's fine. Okay, Pat, anything?
No, I learned a lot. Thanks, everybody. Pretty cool.
Good stuff. Okay, so Stephanie, are we good?
We're good.
We're good. All right. So so tomorrow we're gonna close at 6. The pizza and the soda and the water will arrive at 4:30 p.m. So what I'd like to do is try to hack from 2 to 4:30. And I'll reconfigure the tables so that we have kind of 3 places, and so we can all be in the same room, but get to our own corners. And then at 4:30, let's plan to, like, that's when we're done hacking and we start presenting. So when we get the pizza, we'll present, and I'll try to get some people from around the lab and other people to look at our presentations and give us feedback and dialogue. And before we hang up, Pat?
I was just gonna say, I can't be here, well, I'm gonna be at the media lab doing something else, so maybe I'll drop by. But I just wanted to say, I'd like to be in touch with anyone and everyone, but probably won't be here unless I can drop it.
Yeah, so you'll be doing, the city thing. So do you, I guess, well, before you go, do you want to invite people to this, to the Tuesday night thing?
Or tomorrow?
No, but going forward.
Oh, yeah, let's do that. You and I can potentially post people around the code for Boston Civic Hack, which is at the Cambridge Innovation Center. So maybe we can follow up with some, email in terms of who's interested in that, for what projects.
Okay, I'm in. So I guess as part of Pat's saying goodbye, it's also like, hello. And so it's a new beginning. And so basically, Pat, when you're saying he'd like to stay in contact, I too would like to stay in contact. It's been very successful today, and we actually made some breakthroughs I wasn't expecting. So basically what we want to do is invite people for maybe a couple of months to have a regular Tuesday night data and VR civic and general hacking group where we'll take over a table or two at Code for America Hack Night at Cambridge Innovation Center. And that's Tuesdays at 7. So if you'd like to come and hack with us, either Pat or I or another person, at least one or two of us will be there, and we'll have a chance to keep doing some of our projects and carry forward with the thinking, nothing else being that we'll maybe rally something for the Brookline public school hackathon in April.
And Boston's pretty cooperative if we come up with something. I mean, they're kind of the host, right?
Yeah, the host is, thanks to the Code for Boston and their brigade captain, it's Code for Boston.
Yeah.
Pizza's on them. All right, so thanks everybody. We'll see you online tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern. Until then, happy hacking.